this episode of Questions with Father, we address one of the most contested documents of the Second Vatican Council, Dignitatis Humanae. Father Paul Robinson joins us to ask the hard question: can this declaration on religious liberty be reconciled with the traditional teaching of the Church? We will explore the Society of St. Pius X's objections to this declaration, the pre-conciliar magisterium, and the post-conciliar attempts to reinterpret this controversial document. From Father Bernard Lucien's modern defense to Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger's 1987 reply to Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, this episode critically examines religious liberty, human dignity, and the nature of truth in public life. Like all our episodes, this is free to listen to, but please do consider a one-time or a small monthly recurring donation, and please consider leaving a rating and a review on the podcast to help others find these episodes and to discover the beauty and the truth of traditional Catholicism. So now let's join Father Robinson for Freedom or Error, What the Church Taught Before Vatican II. Father Robinson, great to have you back for an episode of Questions with Father, taking a little pause as we kind of calibrate and get our guests ready for the last few episodes of the Catholic Mass series. So you wanted to come on and do an episode of Questions with Father about a 40-year-old document of Vatican II, which sounds interesting and fascinating, but I got to ask the question, why?
Yeah, well, the document is Dignitatis Humanae, and actually, I think it was promulgated. It was the last document of Vatican II that was promulgated on December 7th, 1965. So, it's
60 years old.
60 years old. But recently, because of the fact that the Society of St. Pius X claims that this document contradicts the constant teaching of the Church, and this is obviously one of our sort of flagship positions, that there are actual passages of Vatican II that contradict the constant teaching of the Church. There are people who come out who try to defend Dignitatis Humanae, and recently there's this book that came out from Aruca Press that reprints a few essays by a Father Bernard Lucien, a French priest who was ordained in the 70s. And I want to address his arguments, and I want to ask this question: is it possible to reconcile Dignitatis Humanae with the constant teaching of the Church if we just look at it as honestly as possible?
Okay. So this is he's making this claim, this idea that this is compatible with the teachings. So maybe let's take a step back and look at Dignitatis Humanae itself, and what it was all about and what it was saying. And should we start with looking at the document, or do you want to look at what the Church teaching has been about religious liberty before then, or how do you want to dig into this one, Father?
Yeah, I want to look at the problem. I want to look at the problem that every single one of us faces if we look at the text of Dignitatis Humanae and we look at the previous magisterium. Anybody with just who's able to read and understand text is going to be faced with a difficulty. There is a very obvious contradiction between Dignitatis Humanae and previous teaching, and that leads us to say, well, where is the real Church? Where is the real teaching of the Church? Or to try to find a way to reconcile Dignitatis Humanae with the previous teaching. So what we're going to do first is just say, what's the problem? What's this contradiction what we're seeing? So okay. Let's look at Dignitatis Humanae, what Dignitatis Humanae says, and then let's look at what the previous teaching says. So the most controversial paragraph of Dignitatis Humanae is paragraph 2, and just to quote you part of it, what it says, and then we'll say why is this problematic. It says, this Vatican Council declares that the human person has a right to religious freedom. This freedom means that all men are to be immune from coercion on the part of individuals or of social groups and of any human power, in such wise that no one is to be forced to act in a manner contrary to his own beliefs, whether privately or publicly, whether alone or in association with others, within due limits. So the document says all men have a right to religious freedom, and it defines religious freedom as an immunity from coercion. So, no person is ever to be forced to act in a manner contrary to their beliefs, publicly or privately, within due limits that it doesn't define. I think when we hear this today, especially as Americans, we're just like, well, what's the problem? What's the issue? I mean, obviously, you can't force people to convert. You can't force people to go against their faith.
Sure.
And of course that we can't do that. The church has always taught you can't force people to convert to a false religion. But the thing is that's one type of coercion, and that's like a physical coercion where you say, like you put a gun to somebody's head and you say, you must become a Muslim or a Catholic or whatever. But there are other types of pressure that that have been exerted on people of false religions before by the Catholic Church. They're considered perfectly legitimate. So I take the example, like, if you had a Muslim come over to your house. So you have a friend who you work with, and he happens to be a Muslim. And you say, hey, come over with your family. We'll have supper or whatever. And when he's over there, he's just like, okay, Andrew, well, this is the time when me and my family, we get out our prayer mats and we face Mecca, and we're going to have a Muslim prayer. And it seems like Dignitatis Humanae is saying to you, yeah, you can't say no to him. He's saying to you, this is the way we act as Muslims. These are our beliefs. This is what we want to do. And you would then try to coerce him and say, no, you can't do that in my house. Sorry. This is my house. Or think about what happened in Catholic countries in the past. Think of a Catholic country like Peru before the council, where they say, we are a Catholic country. And we put that in our constitution. And you have certain Protestant missionaries who they say, we want to come to your country and we want to preach our understanding of the Bible to Peruvians. Well, the government back then, it would say, no, you can't do that. Yeah. They would say, I don't care what your belief is, but we are a Catholic country, and we don't let Baptists come here and preach their religion. Or if there were Baptists living there as private people, they weren't Baptist missionaries or whatever. And those Baptists, they said, well, we're Baptists and we want to build a church. We want to build our place of worship. And the Peruvian government would say, no, you can't do that. We are a Catholic country, and we don't allow false religions to build public places of worship in our country because we want to preserve our people from error. We believe that this is damaging to them to be taught teachings of false religions, and just like you in your home, you don't want the Muslims doing their thing. This would be kind of a bigger Catholic home. This country is our Catholic home, and we don't want false religions doing their thing in public in our country and leading our people to error. So when Dignitatis Humanae says, just very sweeping statements about all men at all privately or publicly are to be immune from coercion, from any coercion. This, in fact, contradicts previous practices of the church, where the Catholic Church did not hesitate to, in some instances, tell people, no, you can't build a temple, or no, you can't come into our country, and effectively, prevent people from doing certain things for their religion.
So that's interesting. I when you hear the term coercion, when I hear the term coercion, and you read that quote from Dignitatis Humanae saying people are immune from coercion, like you said, my first thought was, well, of course, yeah, people should be immune from coercion. I was thinking of violent coercion, and I guess we'll define the terms a little bit more here in a minute, but I was like, yeah, that does make sense. Like, why would this be such a big sticking point between between Archbishop Lefebvre and the traditional prelates at the Second Vatican Council and what they were saying? I'm starting to see where you're going with this, though. There's a lot of gray area there that wasn't really well defined. Yeah,
I mean, basically, we could think coercion is anybody in power saying to someone else, "No, you can't do that. I'm sorry, you can't do that." It's not this very sort of basic and brutal way of saying you have to convert to a religion. It includes many other different types of coercion, including saying like you can't build this building, or you can't come here in public and worship in this way. But the fact is, when we get down to not just talking about the past history of the church, where the church has used coercion, that those much milder forms of coercion in the past, but the church has taught definitively that basically the use of coercion is good in Catholic countries. To this sort of mild coercion is good. So the clearest statement is in the encyclical Quanta Cura. And what's interesting about Quanta Cura of Pius IX, so this is an encyclical in the late 1800s. I can't remember the exact date. It might have been 1860s, but it was a document to which the Syllabus of Errors, famous Syllabus of Errors, was attached. And in this encyclical, Pius IX uses the full weight of his position as Pope. He puts the language, he puts all the language in there to indicate, I am, from my office as Pope, defining something that's a faith of morals. I'm binding the consciences of Catholics. So it's clear, this is infallible. This is an infallible statement. And so it's not just like the previous magisterium contradicts Dignitatis Humanae. It's that one of the infallible statements of the previous magisterium contradicts Dignitatis Humanae.
Wait, just real quick. Sorry, Father. Are you saying Quanta Cura is an infallible statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that Pius IX very clearly and explicitly fulfilled the conditions for making an infallible statement from the chair of Peter when he issued Quanta Cura. Got it. Okay. And so what I'm going to read is part of the infallible magisterium of the Church. He says, "You well know, venerable brethren, that at this time men are found not a few, who, applying to civil society the impious and absurd principle of naturalism, as they call it, dare to teach that the best constitution of public society and civil progress altogether require that human society be conducted and governed without regard being had to religion, any more than if it did not exist, or at least without any distinction being made between the true religion and false ones." So by this, he's saying it's a false teaching to say that you should have secular states. Like, secular states are not good. Where you have a state that explicitly says we're not going to pay attention to the religion of our citizens. We're not going to govern our state based on the religion of our citizens. We're not going to do anything about religion. So he continues, "And against the doctrine of Scripture, of the Church, and of the Holy Fathers, they do not hesitate to assert that it is the best condition of civil society in which no duty is recognized as attached to the civil power of restraining by enacted penalties offenders against the Catholic religion, except so far as public peace may require." So there you have it. I mean, he's saying that it's wrong to say that the best situation is in which those who govern the state do not punish offenders against the Catholic religion. And when he says restrained by enacted penalties, he's talking about coercion. I mean, that's coercion. You think about in times past where heretics would be punished, by the civil power. The civil arm would have laws against heresy in the state, okay, right? Mm-hmm. So this is explicitly speaking of the fact that the civil power does have a duty to coerce people who offend against the Catholic religion. Then he says, "From which totally false idea of social government, they do not fear to foster that erroneous opinion most fatal in its effects on the Catholic Church and the salvation of souls, called by our predecessor Gregory XVI an insanity, namely, that liberty of conscience and worship is each man's personal right, which ought to be legally proclaimed and asserted in every rightly constituted society, and that a right resides in the citizens to an absolute liberty, which should be restrained by no authority, whether ecclesiastical or civil, whereby they may be able openly and publicly to manifest and declare any of their ideas whatever, either by word of mouth, by the press, or in any other way. So he condemns this idea of religious liberty, liberty of conscience, liberty of worship, as well as the idea that people are not to be restrained in any way. Like the idea that whatever religion you want to profess, you have a right to profess. And the state must sit back and do nothing. Like the state must be totally agnostic with regards to religion and not have any laws in regards to the practice of religion among its citizens. So he's condemning that idea. And that's the idea of Dignitatis Humanae. It seems very clearly that is precisely the idea of Dignitatis Humanae.
Yeah, and using words like "it is an insanity."
Well, he's quoting Gregory the 16th.
Well, he's quoting Gregory.
Yeah, Mirari Vos, but he's
still
concurring with it. Right,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Gregory XVI, he said, it's insane to think that human beings have a liberty of worship to where we God has given us the ability to choose whatever God we want, that is part of our human liberty to choose. So when we're talking about liberty, we're not talking about the raw possession of free will. We're talking about whether we have the liberty to make right the practice of a false religion. So do I have the freedom as a human being to make it correct that I worship this God or that God? Is it by the fact that I choose to worship as a Muslim that makes it right or makes it wrong? This is what we're talking about when we're talking about liberty of conscience, liberty of worship. Of course, we all know that we can make choices by our free will, and if I choose to get out a prayer rug and worship towards Mecca, then I have the ability to do that.
But that's license, and that's we can probably go down a whole rabbit hole if we wanted to. But that's the difference between license and liberty. License is I can go rob a bank today. But I do not have the liberty to rob a bank.
Yes,
I have the ability to do it. License, I don't have the right to do it.
Yes.
Liberty.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, and that's some part of the difficulty of this old language. We have to understand exactly what they're saying. And it's all worked out in Leo XIII's encyclical Libertas Praestantissimum. But it's just very, very clear that he is saying that on the one hand, human beings do not have a right to religious liberty. And on the other hand, it is the duty of the state to restrain people, that there is no immunity of coercion, for people in the practice of their religion. Does that seem clear? I mean, when we compare what Quanticura says, the Dignitatis Humanae says, does it seem clear that they're saying two different things?
Saying two different things, for sure. Maybe, and I guess we'll get there, but maybe what they're saying in Dignitatis Humanae is trying to say, hey, coercion, violent coercion, but they don't say that. They don't make that distinction. They're just saying any coercion of any kind. And I was thinking while you were talking, maybe like an example of coercion would be a Catholic university, for instance, like St. Mary's College, for instance, in Kansas, Catholic University, or Notre Dame, or, pick your university. They will admit non-Catholics, but maybe the non-Catholics have to pay more tuition than a baptized Catholic. I don't know if they do or not, but that would be an example of coercion. Like, you get a benefit for being a Catholic, and you have to pay more if you're not. That's right. That's perfectly good.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that would be an example as well, for sure. I mean, I think of Catholic countries in the past where they said, look, if you're not Catholic, you can't hold office.
Right.
And that's a form of coercion on the citizens who are not Catholic. So, I mean, let's go back to Dignitatis Humanae, and after having looked at Quanticura, and see in this paragraph 2 that it's basically affirming to be true and right what Quanticura is saying is wrong. So the paragraph 2, it says, the Council further declares that the right to religious freedom has its foundation in the very dignity of the human person, as this dignity is known through the revealed word of God and by reason itself. This right of the human person to religious freedom is to be recognized in the constitutional law whereby society is governed, and thus it is to become a civil right. So, Dignitatis Humanae is saying that there is liberty of conscience worship. I mean, Gregory XVI says it's insane. Dignitatis Humanae says it's given to people by God, that it comes from God, and that the state has a duty to recognize that right. So Quod Cura says the state has a duty to restrain people's freedom of worship, that it needs to be restrained. And Dignitatis Humanae is saying that it must not be restrained. So it's like a direct a direct contradiction between those two. Mm-hmm. So then it gives the reason, like where does this right come from? And it goes on talking about the false basis, what we would consider to be the false basis of, like, where does this right to religious liberty come from? They say it comes from the dignity of the human person. It is in accordance with their dignity as persons, that is, as beings endowed with reason and free will, and therefore privileged to bear personal responsibility, that all men should be at once impelled by nature and also bound by a moral obligation to seek the truth, especially religious truth. They are also bound to adhere to the truth once it is known, and to order their whole lives in accordance with the demands of truth. However, men cannot discharge these obligations in a manner in keeping with their own nature unless they enjoy immunity from external coercion as well as psychological freedom. Therefore, the right to religious freedom has its foundation not in the subjective disposition of the person, but in his very nature. In consequence, the right to this immunity continues to exist even in those who do not live up to their obligation of seeking the truth and adhering to it, and the exercise of this right is not to be impeded, provided that just public order be observed. So they're saying that we as human beings are given a dignity by God, which is basically the possession of free will, where we're able to make our own choices, and we're able to make judgments with our intellect. That the possession of these faculties gives us a right that people not try to tell us what the truth is, that we have the right to pursue truth on our own, without people trying to say, well, no, you're wrong. And that this is the basis of our religious liberty, that we have the freedom to choose whatever religion we want, and the state must recognize this freedom, and it must not impede us in any way from exercising that freedom. So, it doesn't even matter if we're doing a good job pursuing the truth or not, if we're right or we're wrong. The state still must uphold that. So, if a Muslim believes that his religion is divinely inspired and that it teaches the way to heaven, then the state must support him. If he wants to build a mosque, if he wants to spread Islam in the United States of America, then the United States has to say, more power to you. We support you.
Mm-hmm. But I think it seems to me that the error in that statement of Dignitatis Humanae is here, in this one at least, talking about the nature, that man has his own nature to be able to choose religious freedom. And we would argue, Father, I think man does not have it within his nature to choose error. That is not part of man's nature. Whereas Dignitatis Humanae is saying it is part of man's nature to be able to choose right and choose wrong. That's not it. Man's nature is to know, love, and serve God, and to do that is to seek the truth. And we know where the truth lies. So the nature is to seek the Catholic religion, the religion that God gave us.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see that they say we're not, like those who try to, on the position of the church, try to clarify the document. They're saying, we're not saying that people have a right to choose error. We're just saying they have a right not to be impeded in pursuing whatever they perceive in their conscience to be true. And we're going to say, well, no. no, that's not correct. Just by the fact that you claim, you say, well, this is what my conscience is telling me, that doesn't mean I just have to say, well, I guess there's nothing I can do. I mean, I just have to approve whatever you're doing. No, on the contrary, there are situations when even if someone in their conscience, even if they're of good faith, if they're holding on to error, it means that they can be impeded by someone else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's think of a parent is raising their children, and their children goes to school, and their children gets the idea that a boy gets the idea that he's a girl. This is his impression. Does the parent have the right to say, no, you're not, and you're not going to change the way you dress or what have you, because you're wrong. You're wrong. Or is the parent going to say, well, I can't remember if I said a girl to boy or a boy to girl, but Johnny, look, you've got human dignity is given to you by God, and therefore I just can't do anything in this situation. You just work things out on your own. Of course not.
That is entirely the wrong application of human dignity. The human dignity would be for the parent to say, no, fulfill your human dignity that you have as part of your nature.
Absolutely. So the fact is that Catholic countries, as I said, they did this sort of impeding for centuries, and the church taught it was a good thing, and now Dignitatis Humanae is teaching that it's a bad thing and against man's dignity for him to be coerced, even when he's in error. And this is just revolutionary teaching. It's the teaching of the dignity of the man that comes from the French Revolution, it comes from the Enlightenment, comes from the Freemasons. This is contrary to the notion of human nature that the Catholics have always had. That really scandalously, a document of the Church, of the Catholic Church, is endorsing a Freemasonic idea about human nature. That we have this liberty, that we are basically God unto ourselves. So there's in the Catechism of the Christ of the Church, this really excellent book which has a chapter on religious liberty and talks about Dignitatis Humanae and everything. There's this question and answer. So it says, how does Vatican II contradict the constant practice of the Church? How does this idea that people are immune from coercion in the practice of any religion whatsoever, how does it contradict the constant practice of the Church? Answer: the saints have never hesitated to break idols, destroy their temples, or legislate against pagan or heretical practices. The Church, without ever forcing anyone to believe or be baptized, has always recognized its right and duty to protect the faith of her children and to impede, whenever possible, the public exercise and propagation of false cults. To accept the teaching of Vatican II is to grant that for 2 millennia, the popes, saints, fathers and doctors of the Church, bishops, and Catholic kings have constantly violated the natural rights of men without anyone in the Church noticing. Such a thesis is as absurd as it is impious. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I guess for 2,000 years we've been doing it wrong, and the Freemasons have been able to instruct us about what the real nature of man is, and now we're going to correct ourselves. I mean, that's just absurd to think that that's the case.
Right. And it's not like it was an old teaching that existed in the 400s, 500s. No one believed it. No one practiced it. No, I mean, we have Gregory the 16th, Pius the 11th, etc., saying this all the way up to Leo the 13th, talking about liberty, all the way up until essentially the doorstep of the Second Vatican Council. The Church is reinforcing all of these things.
Yeah, not only that, it's condemned. It very clearly condemned the opposite belief, the belief that's in Dignitatis Humanae. But very condemningly, the very people who put Dignitatis Humanae together, or the main author, John Courtney Murray, Father John Courtney Murray, American priest, American Jesuit, and Father Yves Congar, one of the liberal parity at the council, they said that they basically admitted, this is contrary to past church teaching. So I quote the Catechism again. It says, the chief inspirer of the text, Father John Courtney Murray, acknowledged in his commentary, almost exactly a century later, the Declaration on Religious Freedom seems to affirm as Catholic teaching that which Gregory XVI and Pius IX held as insanity, a mad idea. Yeah, that's correct. Father Yves Congar admitted it cannot be denied that the Declaration on Religious Liberty does say materially something other than the syllabus of 1864. It even says just about the opposite of Propositions 15 and 77 to 79 of this document. So here's the situation, Andrew. We have the text of Dignitatis Humanae seems to very clearly contradict infallible teaching of Pius IX. The very people who supported the document, and even one of the authors of the document, admits it's contradictory to Pius IX. The practice of the Catholic Church after the council was totally opposite of what the practice had been throughout the history of the church. No more telling people of false religions that their religion is false. No more Catholic countries where all the Catholic countries, they were told no longer to be confessional states, and the supporting of the pluralistic secular state, which had been condemned before, where the church has always said the pluralistic secular state is not proper, for the state to be agnostic in religion. So there's this total contradiction between both theory and practice after Vatican II and before Vatican II. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do they try to square this circle? Is this part of what Pope Benedict XVI was going to be doing with the hermeneutic of continuity? Is this how do you square that? Yeah,
it is a really heroic, epic task to do. I mean, this is like one of the labors of Hercules. It's really, really difficult. So, I mean, we with the Society of St. Pius X, we just say, look, they don't agree. They don't agree.
Yeah.
So it seems it's very, very obvious. But there are certain figures out there who try to somehow say that Dignitatis Humanae is not contradictory to past teaching. And I mean, I sympathize because it's a scandal. It's a massive, massive scandal for a council of the church to fall into error, an ecumenical council of the church to fall into error.
Right.
Yet at the same time, let's face it, you really have to close your eyes to the reality to be able to say it doesn't contradict it. So just like we have Pope splainers today, there's also council splainers. The people who just say, well, we're going to find a way somehow, through some special squinting to say the Dignitatis Humanae is reconcilable with past teaching. So there are basically two strategies to do it. One way is to say that, well, if we read Dignitatis Humanae from using this special rubric, this special interpretation, what we find is in fact Dignitatis Humanae is saying the exact same thing as Pius IX. That's okay. That's
hold my beer. Let's go.
Yeah, show me. And then the second strategy is to say, well, yeah, Dignitatis Humanae teaches something different from past teaching, but in fact, it's reconcilable with that past teaching. It's not contradictory to the past teaching, but it's reconcilable with that teaching. It's a development of that past teaching.
I was just going to say, are they going to use that word development of doctrine?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So let's look at the examples of this. So we've got this book, the book published by Aruca Press recently on religious liberty, Father Bernard Lucien. He's going to try to the first strategy, which is much more difficult, to say that Dignitatis Humanae, in fact, is the same thing as Quanta Cura. So the book has two essays by him and one by one of his disciples, Father Antoine Marie de Rajo. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name. And it's just like the foreword, I couldn't believe when I read the foreword. The foreword by this Dr. Alan Phimister, he says basically, if you think that Dignitatis Humanae contradicts past teaching of the church, you're an apostate.
Okay.
I'm like, whoa. All right.
We should probably have our video editor Joe say, big words, apostate, with an arrow pointing to both of our heads at this point.
Well, I mean, it's just like, wow. You can't hold for him, like you fall from the faith for holding this opinion when it's so clear. So right. Anyway, I want to try to understand Father Lucien as best I can. I mean, and I'll be honest, I did all this underlining. I wrote out notes on this book and really tried to figure out what exactly is he saying. But yeah, it's not always clear. These essays are brief, but I was able to extract four things that I think is pretty clearly he's saying. First of all, his main contention is that Dignitatis Humanae is claiming something for men that was not condemned by previous magisterium. He said the previous magisterium said that men do not have a natural right to act as they wish. So when they condemn liberty of worship, liberty of conscience, they're saying that men do not have a right to act as they wish, and that Dignitatis Humanae is saying men have a natural right to act according to their conscience. So he's saying that the previous documents did not say that men did not have a natural right to act according to their conscience. And Dignitatis Humanae is saying that they do, so there's no contradiction between the two, if that makes sense.
So Dignitatis Humanae is saying you have a natural right to act according to your conscience, but previously the previous magisterium was saying you don't have a right to act as you wish. So because one is saying conscience and one is saying acting as you wish, they're different.
Exactly. You got it. You got it.
Okay.
You got it. Very good.
Got it.
Yeah, because it's not easy.
Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, I disagree with that. I disagree that I don't think the previous magisterium was restricting itself to saying, well, you don't have a right to act as you wish. I think it was also saying you don't have a right, even in conscience, to practice a false religion. I certainly think they were saying that as well. But even if Father Lucien is right, that Dignitatis Humanae is only claiming a liberty of conscience for people, the fact is that liberty of conscience is not a Catholic notion. It's a Protestant notion. It's basically pioneered by Luther to say, my conscience is telling me this is what Scripture means, so I don't have to submit to the church. That was his whole shtick. So that's not Catholic. We saw how the document of Pius IX spoke against liberty of conscience. This idea that just because I believe a thing is true, I have a right to do it, and no one can tell me differently. I mean, no one can tell me, well, you can't do that because it's wrong. I can say, well, my conscience tells me it's right, therefore I have a right to do it. So you think of situations where children are taught false ideas and they're in good faith. I mean, if Jewish children are taught from the get-go that they can lie to Gentiles, it's okay to lie to Gentiles, and they truly think that that's acceptable and it's pleasing to God. That's their conscience. The conscience is telling them that they're in good faith. Well, it still doesn't make it right. They don't have a liberty to do that.
It is objectively still wrong.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So then the second point, and this is astonishing. I've never seen anybody say this. He says that basically the church in the past was able to assume that people were going against their conscience when they chose not to be Catholic. If you had Muslims or Jews in a Catholic country, the the Christian state could assume, well, they are Muslims or Jews and acting against their own conscience, and therefore we can coerce them because they're acting against their conscience. And so we're not violating their liberty of conscience, we're actually helping their liberty of conscience by coercing them in religious matters. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It's such a stretch, though. I mean, you didn't ask me whether or not it was stupid, Father. Sorry, that was probably too blunt. That was very blunt. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, we're not mind readers. We can't read the dispositions, right. The internal. We can only judge on the external behavior of people and the objective order. And we can say, objectively, the Muslim religion is a false religion. And therefore, we're going to try to not allow people to practice that publicly to preserve the faith, the Catholic faith of our citizens. But there's no way to judge a person's conscience and to say whether they're in good faith or bad faith in practicing the Muslim religion. I mean, you think about how in a lot of these Catholic states there were actual ghettos. When I was in Rome last month, we saw the Jewish ghetto, for instance, in Rome, and this was where the Jews all lived in Rome. And they had their own circles, and they just stuck to themselves. And so all of their children being raised in the Jewish religion and in the midst of a Catholic state. And so, I mean, those children sincerely believe that the Jewish religion is the true faith. And I mean, there's no way the Catholic state would be able to say, well, all these people are in bad faith in holding to the Jewish religion. They're not acting according to their conscience. So, yeah, that just blew my mind when I saw that in there.
Yeah. I mean, you can't judge someone's conscience now, much less hundreds of years ago. So that's. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of shows me when you try this heroic task of reconciling Dignitatis Humanae, it just leads you to admit very strange things. Okay. Mm-hmm. So then the third point of Father Lucien that I tried to extract is that saying that, well, basically now we have a different situation from then, where we're no longer able to assess that people are acting against their conscience, even in Catholic countries. And so Dignitatis Humanae is saying in that situation where you can't assess that someone is acting against their conscience, then you just have to let them practice their religion. Yeah. For the common good. You need to tolerate the members of the false religions, just like Leo XIII taught in certain situations you have to tolerate the practice of false religions. And so that's what you need to do. But the thing is, Dignitatis Humanae says nothing about toleration. It says nothing about any of this. It doesn't say anything about what we're talking about. It doesn't say anything about Catholic countries in the past being able to judge people's consciences. It doesn't say that the situation is different now. Dignitatis Humanae speaks in very sweeping terms. It says all people at all times. It's part of our human nature. It's not limited to certain historical contexts or whatever. Right. They're saying this is for every situation. So and it doesn't bring into account at all the idea of religious toleration, because the Church has always taught, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is an amount of religious toleration that can and should even exist for the good of public order, which I think this argument is kind of talking about.
Yes. So it's been taught by Leo XIII and others that that the Catholic state is not always obliged to coerce, or forbid. I mean, that there may be situations in which it's not for the common good to restrict the practice of the false religions, because it might cause the overthrow of the state, or it might cause more damage than would be good, would be prudent.
Right. But that's not liberty. That's toleration. They're very different things.
They're very different things, because the liberty is saying it's a right that's part of our human nature. In other words, it's a good. It's a good.
Mm-hmm.
So here's, for instance, what Dignitatis Humanae says in paragraph 3. An injury is done to the human person and to the order established by God for men if man is denied the free exercise of religion in society. assuming that in that exercise a just public order is maintained. So these are just very, very sweeping terms for all societies. So then the fourth point of Father Lucien is that since Dignitatis Humanae reasserts Catholic dogma and is part of an ecumenical council of the Church, therefore is part of the ordinary magisterium, and it is infallible. So Dignitatis Humanae is infallible because it reasserts previous magisterium.
Wow.
He's not saying it fulfills the four conditions, that it's like a statement from the chair. But of course, we would say it doesn't reassert previous magisterium. I mean, maybe that would be correct if it actually reasserted previous Catholic teaching, but it does not. It does not. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, I just I think it's I honestly think it's a little crazy. I think it's a little crazy. So, but besides this, you know, there are a number of authors who tried this exercise of saying that it can be reconciled with previous teaching, and what's notable is that they don't really agree. I think of Thomas Pink or Father Crean and so on, Father Harrison, and you know, they're all trying to accomplish this feat, but they all come up with different solutions and typically don't agree with their solutions because, I mean, let's face it, no solution is really satisfying, and there's always holes that can be poked in them. So that's the first strategy, first way of attempting say that actually it agrees with previous teaching. The second way is actually the way chosen by Rome itself. This was the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith under Cardinal Ratzinger in the 1980s, motivated by Archbishop Lefebvre. So Archbishop Lefebvre was submitting all these dubia on religious liberty to Rome, 39 dubia, and wanting some answer, some clarification on Dignitatis Humanae, because he was respectful, and he says, please clarify for me this document, which seems clearly against, constant Catholic teaching. And there was this interesting document, kind of a strange document. It's an unsigned document that came from the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith on March 9th, 1987. And it follows the second strategy that I was talking about, basically to say that, yes, Dignitatis Humanae teaches something different, but it's not contradictory to previous teaching. It's in harmony with that previous teaching. It's a development of the previous teaching.
Okay.
So at the beginning of the document, it explains the principles for the solution it's going to propose. And two of the principles I think are really important. Here's one of them. The long and meticulous study of which these pages are the result has been made with the profound conviction of the fact that the proposed problem requires the application of all the traditional criteria for the interpretations of the text of the magisterium, and particularly the consideration of their historical doctrinal context and their finality. This must not make us forget, however, that the Roman pontiffs, in the questions with which we are concerned, as with so many other questions, on the occasions of errors or contingent situations, have often issued teachings which rise above that contingency, teachings that are more general with a permanent value independently of their historical circumstances. Nevertheless, even in these cases, the knowledge of those circumstances can be necessary in order to understand the exact contents of the permanent teaching that is proposed. So basically the saying is...
What? Sorry.
Basically it's saying we when we look at past teaching, we have to look at the historical context of that teaching. And they're already anticipating our objection, because we're going to say like, we know what you're going to say. You're going to say that teaching was just based on that, it was just for that time. and it's not for all time. It wasn't a permanent teaching expressing principles that are always true. It was just based on historical circumstances. So then it goes on to say... You can tell by my
face exactly what I'm thinking. Okay, go ahead.
So then it goes on to say, well, wait a second. We know that there is permanent teaching on the part of the popes. We understand that, and we agree with that. But we still need to look at the historical context. So it's like this kind of soft historicism where they're going to be saying, well, even with the permanent teaching, we have to look at the historical context and understand it in that context, and say that it's at least partly predicated on the time in which it was taught.
But it wasn't. But it's not. But the church didn't say, hey, in this situation, under these forms of government and in this century, this is what it is. It was an infallible document saying liberty, no. Toleration, okay. Right? Yeah. Am I looking at this way too black and white?
No. Am
I right?
No. It was not dependent on the historical circumstance, or at least the truth of it is not dependent upon historical circumstance. It's a principle that's for all time, certainly.
The principle is there. You can apply the principle in various ways, in various historical contexts, absolutely. But but they're saying that the principle changes based on historical information or historical context. And
well, they don't say it explicitly. They don't say it explicitly, but it just makes us a little suspicious. Like, okay, yeah, you're going to say it's based on historical circumstances. So then another principle they enunciate. Moreover, in the study of these questions, it will also be necessary to take into account the fact that, as you know, the tradition of the Church, of which the magisterium is an organ, and at the same time its authentic interpreter, is a living reality. This tradition is not a simple repetition, but involves a doctrinal development in continuity, as the history of the Church proves abundantly. The fact that the teaching of the Second Vatican Council on the question of religious liberty undoubtedly represents a certain novelty in regard to the previous magisterium is not a problem if it is a question of a novelty which is included in that reality of development in continuity. So what are they saying there, Andrew?
So they're saying, yes, it is different. There is a novelty. But as long as we see that it's a novelty in progress of development of doctrine, it's not a novelty that contradicts doctrine. It's a novelty that helps us lead towards a better understand, or a more full, a more complete (brackets existentialism) understanding of doctrine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's saying that basically it's new, but it's traditional at the same time because it's a development, not a contradiction of the previous teaching.
But it's not a development. It is a contradiction. Like just naming it so doesn't make it so.
Right. Yeah. This is the problem.
Sorry.
This is the problem.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is the strategy that the document used. It's like, okay, well, we have to look at the historical context of the previous teaching, and we have to recognize that basically, the magisterium of your day says to you what is true. And if it says it's true, you got to agree with it. That's living tradition. You know that Ecclesia Dei Afflicta of John Paul II, after the consecrations of Archbishop Lefebvre 1988, John Paul II, just a few days after it, he issued this document that says that the problem with Archbishop Lefebvre is he has a false notion of tradition. He doesn't understand that tradition is living. Right. Yeah. And we are telling him we are the magisterium. We're telling him what is true, and he's not accepting it. He's not accepting the possibility of a development of doctrine. He's no, in fact, he wasn't accepting a contradiction of doctrine.
Right. Father, we're just doing this article on sspx.org about the race idea. Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring this up is because there are principles at play, which is you should treat all men with dignity. So it kind of ties into this. And what popes are doing, and previously we're looking at what popes were saying throughout the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s about slavery and about enslaving peoples. And what they were doing is they were taking this idea of the dignity of man and saying, hey, in this historical context, hey, now people are enslaving folks from Africa, from the Indies, from all these places. We're going to apply this idea of dignity to this situation. To me, that's real living tradition. That's real development of doctrine. Development of doctrine is not contradictory.
Yes.
It's almost like what churchmen are trying to do now is to do what Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is doing, which is, oh, hey, previously African Americans could not be priests. Oh, now they can. New prophecy, huzzah, now all of a sudden we can.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
That's not development of doctrine, that's change.
Yeah. Yeah, like the Pepsi prophecy, Pepsi revelation or something. Maybe we could call it something like that. The choice of a new generation, like the new generation gets a new dogma. I have to say it's basically gaslighting. It's basically gaslighting, Andrew.
Right.
That's what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, so then the document goes on to try to square the teaching of Dignitatis Humanae with previous teaching. And it says, look, Dignitatis Humanae is not teaching that religious liberty means you have a right to practice error, to believe error. That's not what it's saying. And they very, very clearly exclude that possible interpretation. They say what we're saying is that men have a right to immunity from coercion. All right? That's what Dignitatis Humanae is saying. And we admit that this is a development. This is something new. Okay? That people have this liberty from coercion in religious matters. We admit that is new, but it's a development in continuity with past teaching, and hopefully you're convinced that that's not the case based on what we've seen previously. That this so-called immunity from coercion, this right to immunity from coercion, was condemned by previous teaching.
Yeah. So, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get that all straight in my head.
Yeah. I mean, so this means, like, effectively, if in your conscience you believe that something is true, therefore you must not be prohibited. No one can say to you, even if they're in charge, even if they're president of the country, they can't say to you, you can't do that. So if you say you're a Satanist, or you say you're in a suicide cult or whatever, and like so many people have to commit suicide every month in your religion, then the state just says, well, that's their belief, and they honestly believe that, so I can't stop them. What they do in their faith, what they do in their temple, is a religious thing, and somehow the citizens must have an autonomous zone. Their human dignity demands an autonomous zone for them when it comes to religion, and that's an area that the state cannot reach. So,
and this is very, yeah. So they're saying I'm trying to wrap my head around what they're trying to argue, and it's hard for me because they're saying all of a sudden now we have understood fully that people now have this right which previously did not exist before. They're trying to make up new rights essentially.
Yes. Is
that fair?
Yeah, just like the Declaration of the Rights of Man from the French Revolution, or we're great at this in modern man, revolutionary man. It's like we make up all kinds of rights for ourselves that don't exist, that did not come from God, especially the right to do whatever we want. So especially the right to be God, the right to create what is good and what is evil, for us to define what is good and what is evil. That's the right that we want for ourselves. So
are they going to redefine what the role of the state is then? I mean, because that sounds like that's what they're trying to do, is trying to say, well, the state no longer has any role in trying to coerce good behavior, moral behavior.
Right. it's somehow saying that there's a special case, like the state has a competency to judge that physical violence, for instance, is not good. And the citizens must not do that, and the state can step in. You can send the cops over, they can break people up, and so on. But in the area of religion, somehow the state has no ability to discern what is right and what is wrong. And it must allow citizens to do whatever they want. So, yes, the document from the CDF, it admits that Dignitatis Humanae is teaching novelty. It says there exists a novelty in the conception and the competence of the state with regards to the religious life of its citizens, and a doctrinal development concerning the foundation of the absence of legal coercion in religious matters. So they've invented a new right. They state clearly this is not a positive right to the profession of error. It's a negative right not to be coerced in religious matters. And we answer, this is against the constitution of the church. The church never acknowledged such a right. Freemasons acknowledge it. The Enlightenment acknowledges it. Revolutionary Man acknowledges it. The church condemned it. Says there is no such right. Yeah. Secondly, the state is entrusted with looking after the common good of its citizens. Part of the common good of the citizens is that they hold on to truth. And the state is competent to recognize which is the true religion, which is the false religion. And so it's totally within the power of the state to say to false religions, like, you cannot worship publicly in this state because your religion is erroneous and your beliefs will lead people to hell. So, yes, in other words, the state cannot properly look after the common good of its citizens unless it is concerning itself to some degree with the religions that are practiced in its nation. And so the secular state, so-called secular state, that says we're not going to look at religion at all, we're not going to regulate religion at all in our state, is failing in its duty. So effectively, you have these two false notions. You have the false notion of the state, and you have the false notion of the dignity of man, of human nature. And you know, if you read this document in detail, and it's online, you can find this document online in its original glory, and it's mainly French. It has some Latin passages, it even has some Italian passages in it. But there's also an English translation out there somewhere online if you do some digging. But you know, the problem with the notion of human dignity, and this continues to this day, you'll find this in Pope Francis, Pope Benedict XVI, Pope Leo, this idea that by the fact that we have free will, that we have a dignity that enables us to use our free will however we want. And it does not consider what we call operational dignity, the manner in which we use free will. So traditional teaching was that you lose your dignity if you use your free will wrongly. So that's the same for like the right to life. If someone kills another person, you know, like assassinates or murders another person, we can't say that okay, they have dignity, so we can't use the death penalty against them. The fact is they've surrendered their dignity by performing this crime. They lost their dignity by their operations. And we can't fall back on the fact that they have human nature and say that, okay, the fact that makes them still dignified. In other words, we judge their dignity and the use of their powers, not just the possession of those powers.
I think it's also important for us to remember, especially Western civilization, especially Americans, who are very used to this idea of religious liberty coming from our own constitution as Americans, and which is essentially Freemasonic, that it is just as absurd to say that I have the freedom to choose whatever religion I want as to say I have the freedom to commit any crime I want. Those two things in our brains as Catholics, as humans, should be just as outrageous as each other. The problem is, as Americans, oftentimes we are kind of washed in this Freemasonic idea, and it doesn't seem so bad, but it is.
Yeah, it's very, very excellent point. It's so true. It's like somehow what the situation we're in is that we only recognize as bad what we've agreed upon, and we in the States we've decided that it's not bad to choose whatever religion you want, when of course it's bad. Of course it's bad to choose a false religion, and of course it's damaging for the state, for people who pertain to a false religion to be spreading their ideas. But it even goes to things like liberty of press. I mean, we've also agreed, Andrew, that people should have the ability to say whatever they want in the public sphere. And we don't believe that either. We don't believe that if you're holding false positions, that you should have a right to say them. And it's just this marketplace of ideas, and we just argue about it in the public sphere. But that the state has a right to say, well, no, you cannot propagate error. We recognize this as being erroneous, and you're not allowed to propagate error. So you're not allowed to defend the idea that men can become women, for instance, or women become men, or things like that. So yes, we've just we've been brainwashed. we become liberals. We're children of the revolution today. Yeah,
we're all liberals now.
Yes,
there's a soundbite for bite for people to take out of context.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but it is true that it is easy for us to slip into that, but we gotta hold the line.
Yes.
So
and you won't hear this among anybody. I mean, conservative or liberal, they're all ultimately liberals on this question. They all think that we all have this liberty of worship, liberty of conscience, liberty of speech, liberty of press. They claim all those liberties. Who is there today who actually believes the authentic Catholic teaching on these questions? It's very, very rare to find anybody.
Yeah.
Revolution is conquered.
Yeah. Father, this is fascinating. So just to kind of recap, can you kind of give us a couple bullet points, like as a recap, because I'm still feeling a little bit kind of wishy-washy.
Yeah.
What is Father Lucien trying to do here?
Okay, so Father Lucien, he tries to say that in fact, despite all the appearances or whatever, Dignitatis Humanae and Quanta Cura are teaching the exact same thing. And we say that's crazy. There's like no way. Yeah. Then the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, in the reply to Archbishop Lefebvre's dubia, they said Dignitatis Humanae is teaching something different from the constant teaching of the Church, but it's in continuity. It's not in contradiction to that constant teaching. It's in continuity. And we would say neither of those are true. Yeah, neither of those is true. It's clear that Dignitatis Humanae is teaching a doctrine that lines up with the Revolution, with the Enlightenment teaching, with liberalism that was condemned by the popes very clearly pre-Vatican II. And so it cannot be squared. Unfortunately, tragically, it cannot be reconciled with the constant teaching of the Church. And so the reality is that you have, despite the fact it seems unthinkable, you have an ecumenical council of the Church has promulgated a document which contradicts the constant teaching of the Church. That's the sad reality that we have to grapple with.
Yep.
If we're not, deceiving ourselves.
Right. And we can try to do violence to all the texts to try to make it work, but at the end of the day, the simple fact is it just doesn't work. And the book that you were holding up, it's a valiant effort, but it just doesn't work at the end of the day. It doesn't
work, and the sooner we recognize that, the better it will be for our Catholic life. Yeah.
Father, thank you so much. It was a really good recap of this important topic that we all need to understand a little bit better, and really take a step back, and all of us as traditional Catholics, and whoever else is watching, to recognize that, maybe I have a little bit of that brainwashing, a little bit of that gaslighting in the way that I think about things. I know for certain I do. Just thinking, everyone has the right to choose whatever they want. No, that's a liberal idea. We have to fight against that.
Yeah.
So it is really good. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Andrew. I think one of the great challenges of our time is almost like we have to reinvent Catholicism. It's like we don't have a context for practicing Catholicism, and it's like to have a Catholic mind is so hard today because we're not surrounded by a Catholic environment, a Catholic situation. So that's the effort of traditional Catholicism, and we keep plugging away.
Yep. Well, we'll keep plugging away until next time. Father, thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Questions with Father on the SSPX podcast and on our YouTube page. Please consider subscribing to the YouTube account and to the podcasts on Apple Podcasts or wherever fine podcasts are found. And please consider leaving a rating or a review on the podcast. This will make sure that more people can find these episodes and discover the beauty and the truth of traditional Catholicism. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and God bless you.